Well, it is 1 o'clock, so I'm a big fan of starting on time, so I'm going to get started. Thank you for those of you who have introduced yourselves. Love that. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you to Mo. Mo is our term of endearment for Maureen Sullivan, the Director of Institutional Relations at CIEE. And she suggested that I do this webinar. Also gave me a much better title because I was going to call it, "They'll Never Choose Me, and other reasons students don't apply for the Frederick Douglass Global Fellowship," or "Why the heck should I promote this when you only choose 16 fellows?" But Mo thought I could do with a more positive spin. So welcome to Everybody Wins, 10 Reasons to Apply for the Frederick Douglass Global Fellowship. My name is Stacy Benjamin. I'm the Director of the Fellowship and the Associate Director of Minority Serving Institutions. I'm also a proud CIEE alum from 1991 and 1993. And my introduction of myself and this program will end there, because I'm assuming you've all heard of CIEE and you probably already have some basic information about this fully funded opportunity for students of color who want to change the world. So I'm not going to waste your time sharing information that I think you already know. But if that assumption is wrong, however, there's plenty of information on our website, a fabulous video featuring none other than Vice President Kamala Harris, or you can come to any of the information sessions that we now do weekly for students. The fabulous Kendall Cox, the Assistant Director of the Fellowship, conducts those and is usually joined by one of the fellows from last summer. So in the interest of keeping this short and sweet, allow me to jump right into our top 10, after which we'll hear a few remarks from Cameron Lovings, a fellow from this year, and Sandra Cortez, the Assistant Director of International Programs and Community Partnerships at Lehman College in the Boogie Down Bronx in my hometown of New York City. Next slide, please, Kendra. So number one, you knew I'd start with this. It's the Frederick Douglass Scholars Grant. And all eligible students who complete an application receive a $1,500 grant that may be used towards another CIEE program. Now, in the past, it could only be used for a program that same summer, but now it can be used for the fall 2022 or spring 2023 semesters as well. It cannot be used for January term programs, unfortunately, or for virtual internships, because the program fee is actually more than the scholarship. But let's focus on summer opportunities for now. Obviously, $1,500 is only a portion of the program fee, but it's a healthy portion. Most of our summer programs are around the $4,350 mark, and summer scholarships are hard to find, as we know, as financial aid often doesn't cover a summer program. Students can choose any summer program, but for those who want to learn more about Frederick Douglass or leadership or social justice, we've highlighted several options on our website. For example, there's transatlantic crossings in Ghana. There's some students from Ghana pictured there, where you can explore a variety of case studies that exemplify the impact of Atlantic crossings, such as Frederick Douglass's time in Ireland, or how African-American music inspired cultures of resistance, decolonization, and political action in Africa. Other examples are activism and art in Madrid, a season of protest in Cape Town, or intercultural leadership and communication, our signature course in multiple locations, which has been revised to include a segment on the Black Lives Matter movement globally. And the scholars can take those courses with other students of color. When I went abroad with CIEE 30 years ago, I was one of 2 Black students on the program. There were 0 Latinx or Asian students. But this program is changing that, so that when you go abroad as a student of color on a CIE program, you probably won't be the only one. Next slide, please. The GAIN Travel Grant, that I wish we just called the Travel Grant to save ourselves from yet another acronym. But if you have a student who is eligible for the Pell Grant, they can also receive a $500 travel grant towards airfare. They'll receive a lovely coupon from our partners at Student Universe. And that is guaranteed if they apply by the deadline of April 1st. And let's say that the student also applies for a Gilman or an FVA scholarship. That deadline just passed, by the way. It starts to add up. and it covers a substantial portion of the program fee. Next slide, please. Now make yourselves comfortable. I'm about to hit you up with a hardcore sales pitch. And I'm going to tell you the story of how the President's Match began. So we visited Medgar Evers College a few years ago to do an information session. Medgar Evers is a City University of New York school in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. After the session, we met with the president and the provost, who said to us, if you can provide $1,500 in a travel grant, we can pay the rest of the fee for our applicants. And we said, what did you say? Please say that again. And we called it a match, but they actually paid the remaining $2,500 for their students. And our president said, if Medgar Evers can do it, a school with not a ton of resources, let's ask some other presidents. And so we did. And 52 presidents of MSIs made that commitment a couple of years ago. Now that we've opened it up to all schools, we're hoping that some PWIs, that's predominantly white institutions, for those of you who are not familiar with the acronym, we're hoping some PWIs will follow suit. So I am calling your presidents and not having much success, quite frankly. I have yet to actually speak to a president because your gatekeepers are super hard to get past. Or maybe MSIs care more about this initiative than PWIs, or they're more likely to open an email with Frederick Douglass in the subject line. I don't know. We've got 19 presidents on board so far. 15 are MSIs who are recommitting. Shout out to Benedict, Elizabeth City State, hello, Dr. Stevenson, Mount St. Mary, Xavier, and 4 PWIs have joined them. Shout out to Wofford, UC Boulder, University of Wisconsin-Madison, and Denison. Now, if you join their ranks and match the grant for even just one student, that means at least one student of color has access to a summer experience abroad that is almost fully funded. By the way, if you don't want me to call your president, tell me. Some of you already have. And listen, we started approaching presidents because that's what worked with MSIs. Because the study abroad offices at some MSIs can barely support a staff member, let alone have $1,500 lying around. But if you have the money in your budget, we'll take it. We'll take it from your DEI office. We'll take it from your fellowships office. The student who gets to go abroad won't care where the money came from, and neither do we. And we can call it what you want, make a poster of it and everything. So we hope you give that some consideration. Next slide, please. The fellowship also allows you to engage with different students. Students of color sometimes don't think that studying abroad is for them. And if all they see are posters of white people jumping in front of the Eiffel Tower, that might reinforce the misperception that these programs are just for wealthy white people. But a fully funded program inspired by Frederick Douglass, focused on social justice, created for students of color, might attract some students that your standard options do not. And once you get that student in your office or on your mailing list, you can tell them about all the other opportunities out there to go abroad. So that is how the Douglass Fellowship can be leveraged to get more students of color on all sorts of programs. Next slide, please. It can also be used to engage with different organizations on campus. So if you were planning to reach out to the DEI office or the Multicultural Affairs office or the Latinx student group or whomever else might support students of color, the Douglass Fellowship is one opportunity that you can share with them. And it's not an opportunity that can be dismissed as a fluffy vacation, as some folks still regard studying abroad to be. This is a program for students who want to advance positive change in their communities and in the world that's been endorsed by the Vice President of the United States. It's not an excuse to go drinking in Florence. Not that there's anything wrong with going drinking in Florence, I quite like it myself, but this is a different kind of program. Next slide, please. And number 6 is the application as good practice. One component is to create a 3 to 4 minute video that answers the following questions. Why are you interested in the study abroad opportunity? How are you inspired by the legacy of Frederick Douglass? And how have you tried to solve a social problem or improve the lives of others? Producing a video that tells your story is a useful exercise when so much of our communication is done via Zoom or TikTok or other video platforms. These videos, by the way, are a joy to watch. They will restore your faith in the future if you had any doubts. So if you want to be part of the review committee, let me know. Likewise, asking for a letter of recommendation. Another component of the application is a useful exercise. Students will need to do that to apply for grad school or to obtain a job reference, and they could use the letter for other scholarship applications as well. Next slide, please, Kendall. Number 7 is the fellowship amplifies the story of Douglass's time in Ireland. Ireland was the first country Frederick Douglass traveled to. Well, technically he went to Liverpool for a couple of days and then he went to Dublin. And he was there for a speaking tour across the country to raise money for the abolitionist cause. Not the first former slave to do that, by the way, but the most well-known. And what surprised him the most about Ireland was how friendly everybody was. His great-great-granddaughter, Nettie Washington Douglass, I call her Auntie Nettie now, told us how he was delighted that people just looked him in the eye and addressed him as Mr. Douglass and shook his hand. Now, Ireland wasn't paradise. He still got harassed and all the rest of it, but he was used to that. Compared to where he'd come from, Ireland was warm and welcoming. And he electrifies audiences all over the country. He sells lots of copies of his autobiography. He makes some friends who help buy his freedom. His wife also helped buy his freedom, by the way, which is often overlooked. There would be no Frederick Douglass without Anna Douglass, lest we forget. But anyway, he's a celebrity and he's having a good time. So good that he considers not coming back to the States. But young Frederick knows that he has a responsibility. He can't chill in Ireland when his people are still in chains. So on his last night, before he comes home, he writes a letter to fellow abolitionist William Garrison that includes those lines you see on the screen. And he comes back to the States, fired up, focused, with a global perspective that informs his activism. Now, how perfect a story is that for the work that we do? We're not the first to tell it. Obviously, Frederick Douglass told it first. But by sending the fellows to walk in his footsteps, we're amplifying the story in a unique and quite beautiful way. And what really excites me about this initiative is that everyone knows who Frederick Douglass is. Even Donald Trump knows who Frederick Douglass is now. But while they may have heard about Frederick Douglass, the liberated slave, they may not know that he went to Ireland and it was a transformative journey for him. They may not know that Frederick Douglass was one of the most well-traveled men of his time, second only to Mark Twain, perhaps. But if they did know, they might think to themselves, you know what? Maybe I should go abroad one day too. And that mind shift is what we need to change study abroad from being a luxury service that 1 out of 10 privileged students get to experience to a force that can change the world. It's almost as good as Beyonce singing a song about studying abroad, because if we had that, our work would be done. Next slide, please. Number 8 is it gets students of color interested in Ireland as a possible study abroad destination. I don't know about you, but sometimes students ask me what destination will be most hospitable, if you will, because they're concerned that they'll encounter the same racism abroad that they do in this country. Ireland wouldn't have been top of my list until I was there this summer. And Dublin, wow, it's a lot more diverse than it was 20 years ago when I was first there. So if a student of color goes there, they won't have people staring at them like they're some strange alien from outer space. And I found it to be just as friendly as Frederick Douglass did. One of the fellows said in class one day that the Irish were the nicest white people she'd ever met. And she spoke about seeing the Garda, the police force there, and not feeling scared. Because when she sees a group of police officers in DC, she's terrified. And I've been thinking about this a lot, about how students of color really need to go abroad now just to get away from all the madness, just for their own mental health. And I remember how relieved I felt when I got outside of the racist doctrines that exist here, and how surprised I was to learn that my culture was revered outside of this country. With Run DMC, the guys just down the street, are international superstars? What? Our civil rights movement inspired human rights movements around the world. And Frederick Douglass spoke of that same feeling of release and liberation. Sorry for the siren, I live in New York. And he was liberated in a very literal way. And Ireland is fun, and that's important because trying to change the world is hard. And being a student of color that everyone is expecting to change the world can feel burdensome. So I'm glad the fellows had a good time too, and they really explored Ireland because they couldn't go anywhere else. Silver lining of the pandemic. And they went to Galway and Giant's Causeway and a bunch of other places. So I'm glad that they also enjoyed the country. Next slide, please. Number 9 is don't count yourself out. Don't count your students out. When I was in high school, I just went to a regular old public high school, and I told my guidance counselor that my top choices for university were Brown and Yale. And he said very nicely, Stacy, I think you should apply for a state university instead. But guess what? Brown University, class of 1993, thank you very much. And I told Yale, no, thank you. Now, I don't think that counselor meant any harm, although my mother paid him a visit and gave him a piece of her mind, but he just thought Ivy League universities are super competitive and that he'd save me the trouble of applying. Let's not do that. Not going for something because we assume we won't get it is something that we do all the time. So let's not encourage that. I mean, Kendall shared recently what I thought was a super helpful response when talking to students who are doubting themselves. And that's, we're not looking for students, we're looking for students rather, who want to change the world. We don't expect applicants to have already done so. That's why we have the program, to hopefully equip them with the skills that they'll need to be change makers in whatever way they see fit. So I thought that was a really helpful response. Would love to hear any of your suggestions. And lastly, number 10, next slide, please. Somebody has to be chosen, right? And it might be your student, or it might be you if you are a student on the call right now. Almost all the folks you see pictured here didn't think they'd be selected. They were all shocked when we called them to deliver the good news. And even on the program, they were still asking, why'd you choose me? And if they are selected, they're in for a rather phenomenal experience, meeting amazing people in a beautiful country. So to that end, I thought I'd ask one of the fellows to share just a little bit about that experience, because they'll talk about it way better than I will, and allow me to introduce from Hampton University, Cameron Lovings.
Thank you, Stacy. You're always such a hard act to follow. Hello, everyone. It is an honor to be asked to speak to you today. My name is Cameron William Lovings. I'm a third-year political science pre-law major, leadership studies minor at Hampton University. I'm from Richmond, Virginia. So if anyone of you from Virginia, shout out, I guess. And when I think about my time in the fellowship, it goes back to that initial question that Stacy just posed. Why me? When I got the call that I was going to be selected for this fellowship, shout out to the 2020 cohort, the original folks, I was getting ready to leave. My school had just canceled for COVID, and I was getting ready to pack my things and head home. And I remember my first words distinctly were, "Are you sure this is the right Cameron?" Because I'm thinking to myself, I'm just some random freshman at Hampton University who maybe wants to be a lawyer. He's still trying to figure that out. Maybe wants to go into politics. And I saw the absolute level of just intelligence and magnitude from all the other applicants that I was genuinely shocked. And once I got on this trip, I realized that I needed to be in an environment like this. CIE has done such a good job at cultivating an environment of just collaboration, creativity, and overall, I would say an emphasis on change. We talk a lot about this word change, but that is a very real thing. Even in conversations with locals in Dublin or Belfast or Cork or Waterford, having those conversations affects change. Something that may just be seen as an image of an American can then transform into an actual person that can talk about, hey, I see the issues with the Irish persecution done by the British. That is similar to how minorities in America have suffered persecution at the hands of their quote unquote higher authority. And that can mean a lot. So if anything, I don't want to bore you all to tears about my stories about the cliffs of Moher and going off to random, causeways and waterfalls. But I just want to say to your students, for the advisors in the room, tell them that anyone can do this. Anything is possible. If someone like me can do it from Hampton or from Howard or Fisk, I see there's someone from Fisk on the call, Anyone can do it. With that said, I will yield the floor. I will concede my time so I don't go on a 30-minute ramble like I used to do in class. But I appreciate having time to speak with you all today. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron. You are never boring. You're always inspiring. One of my favorite moments from this year was Cameron was playing the piano. We're at the consulate's office, I think. We're all gathered around singing together, and it just makes me so happy to see you here right now. Thank you, Cameron. And now we'll end with a few remarks from a real supporter of the program since its inception. Sandra Cortez is the Assistant Director of International Programs and Community Partnerships at Lehman College and a tireless advocate for her students. We also had the pleasure of welcoming one of her students on the program this summer, Catherine Sanchez, who is planning to change the world as a nurse. Lord knows we need more of those. So please welcome Sandra Cortez to our virtual stage.
Thank you so much, Stacey. And Cameron, I think you're the hard act to follow. You're amazing. So good luck to you with everything that you're trying to accomplish for the future. I know you will. I just wanted to share just a few words based on what I felt worked with my students. I think we had about 16 applicants last year when Catherine received the award. And I will say that it was definitely hard to get students to apply at first. And I think for most of us who work with even, especially with different fellowships, including Gilman.
You have an old busted wig? I want you to grab it. I'm gonna show you how to read.
Sorry, I think there's some noise in the background, but I think most of us know that students automatically think that they're not going to be selected. They automatically think that they're not good enough. And that's especially been my experience in coming from an MSI and an HSI. So a lot of the times our students definitely automatically count themselves out. But what I have found that really works for me at least, and that worked with the Frederick Douglass Fellowship, is that I made sure to explain to students who were applying for this award that a lot of the work that we were doing in sort of drafting out the video that they would be submitting, drafting out their stories, their narratives, is that a lot of that work could also be applied to other scholarships they were applying for as well. So that way it wouldn't necessarily feel like all the work that they were developing was just for this one thing. And if they didn't get it, was sort of, for nothing. So around this time, I was also helping students apply for the Gilman Scholarship, which we know is due in March. So we knew that, okay, everything that you can develop for this video for Frederick Douglass, we can use parts of that for Gilman as well, right? Or for Freeman Asia, or for anything else. Any other fellowships that they're applying for. So I think that was actually a really good strategy to have. And the other thing is also, again, coming back to this idea of students feeling like they're not worthy, like they're not good enough, is you, as an advisor, you have to be able to sit down with a student and see what it is that they're doing in their life that they'd see as something that's regular or typical, and help them understand why that thing holds value, right? So Catherine was somebody who was an essential worker. This is a Lehman College student who is an essential worker in a hospital in the Bronx, which was the hardest hit borough, right, in New York City due to COVID. And she's here, working almost full-time, attending school. And here she is interested in this, but thinking to herself, maybe I'm not good enough. And so, part of my work with her was basically helping her understand, no, I mean, you're doing something incredible right now. And let's think about what it is that you want to do as somebody who is a nurse, as somebody who's working in the hospital systems, like what changes do you see that you can make here? And so I know that for her Frederick Douglass video, she spoke a lot about patient advocacy, right? And understanding that when you're working in spaces where there's a lot of minority populations, low-income populations, a lot of times patients are not able to advocate for themselves and their needs. And so she really wanted to work on that, right? And to be somebody who would be that advocate, and so would change sort of the models in these clinics and hospitals. So all of this to say that that wasn't something that she was necessarily aware of, right? But it wasn't until we started having these discussions that she realized, like, wow, this is something I really care about. And then she really saw then how she aligned herself, right, with Frederick Douglass's leadership. So I think that that was something that happened with every single student who I work with, that they were then able to see themselves as transformational, like, leaders. And that's something that motivated them and helped them at the very end of it. Even if they didn't receive the award, they learned something about themselves that could then make them a better and more competitive applicant for anything else they would be applying for in the future.
Thank you, Sandra. That was brilliant. I'm so glad that you could join us. And we are done right on time. So if you have any questions at all, happy to answer them. Or if you have any ideas for spreading the word about this opportunity or addressing students' concerns, that's also welcome. Would you mind taking the presentation down, Kendall, so we can see people, if there's any people showing themselves? Questions, comments? What specifically are students studying and doing during their travels? Thank you for the question. So they take a course called Transformational Leadership Across Cultures, which is designed to introduce them to various leadership styles so they can learn what leadership style suits them most, as well as learning from the examples of various leaders like Frederick Douglass, like Daniel O'Connell, who was known as a great liberator in Ireland. And in addition to that, there's a number of co-curriculars as well. But I think I'll ask if Cameron, would you mind just sharing a little bit about what you were studying during the program?
Absolutely. I can share a little bit of that. So class time took up a good percentage of our time in Ireland, actually. I remember spending a good 3-4 hours in class per day, but a lot of what we studied is kind of what Stacy was hinting at. It's a lot of learning actual leadership styles, not only through case studies and learning from specific figures, but having readings from legitimate textbooks on leadership, on policymaking, on interpersonal communication that can do a lot to highlight what a lot of people call soft skills, but translate them into actual words and methods and strategies that you can use to improve those soft skills. Instead of going from maybe we're studying at the beginning of the class how to speak to someone about change, you learn how can I frame my narrative in a way that it can appeal to a wide variety of people, as opposed to just saying what I think someone may want to hear or what I would like to say. So I would say that comes to that. We did a lot of field trips where we would study these things in the context of the places they were happening. I think of places such as Derry or Londonderry, depending on your affiliation, in which we studied how to reach across lines politically in the Irish environment. A lot of things, but mostly comes down to framing your narrative would be, I would say, the overall message of the class.
Thank you for that, Cameron. And if anyone wants to see the syllabus, happy to share that with you as well.
Thank you. Stacy, hello. This is Craig Katz from New Jersey City University.
Hi, Craig. Good to see you.
Yes, thanks very much. This was really very informative. I think we're going to follow up with you with my colleagues in the next few days for a quick meeting. I think this is a wonderful opportunity, and this may be more on my side, but unfortunately, we've only had about a month to pull this together to get applications in by the deadline. And what is the normal timeline for announcing the upcoming year's applications?
We launched the application in November. So that's what we did last year as well. Although we found that students were starting the application, as late as February 13th. So
Of course.
I think that's still, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And the vast majority didn't finish it until 11 o'clock at night on February 14th, because I was sitting there watching. So in other words, there's plenty of time, I would say, for students to get their applications together.
Yeah, I think certainly for the next cycle, we're just going to have to keep our eyes open for the November announcement. That way we'll be better positioned to get some applications. We're certainly going to do our best to see what we can pull together in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. And thank you as well for matching, as New
Yes,
Jersey
yes.
City is. Appreciate your support.
Thank you.
Here's a question for you, Cameron. Do you see that? If you could go back in time, what advice would you have given yourself about the application process? Love that question.
That is a great question. I would certainly say starting earlier. Stacy just mentioned, some people were doing their application the day of. Full disclosure, that was me. I definitely was, I think 11:57, I turned in my last essay. I genuinely just wish I would have known about the program a little earlier. And that's where I think a lot of you guys can help us as students out, is as soon as that goes out in November or December that we are opening up those applications, shoot those out to like your Latinx student unions, your Black student unions, your fraternities, your sororities, all of these things, so that I could, your students can have more of a grasp on what's going on, and so they can start a little earlier, because I wish I wouldn't have had to have rushed so much, but the past is the past. Hindsight is 2020. But yes, start earlier.
Thank you again, Cameron. And I missed one. What's the duration of the program? And do students have structured interactions with the local population? It's a 4-week program. The dates are on the website. I think it's mid-July to mid-August. It's our session 3 for the summer. Do students have interaction with the local population? Not as much as we would have liked last time, because COVID just put whatever the word is, it made that difficult, unfortunately, because there were no other students around. But we really want to change that this time round and have I've been reaching out to some organizations to hopefully introduce fellows to their peers who are also looking to make positive changes in their Irish communities. But we did bring some guest speakers to the students. Don Mullen is a documentarian who's based in Belfast. He did an award-winning film on Bloody Sunday. There's also an artist named Loa, who's born and bred in Dublin, but she also has Sierra Leonean heritage, and she spoke to the students. And many of the fellows were musicians like Cameron, so I think they really enjoyed that. So we tried to introduce them to as many local community members as we could, but next summer we really want to take advantage of some peer-to-peer interactions and try to make that happen. Thank you for the question. Any other questions? All righty, I won't keep you because I got to heat up my chicken with peanut sauce. But if you do have questions, you know where to find me. Okay, you may not know where to find me. I'm going to put my email address here. sbenjamin@ciee.org, or our general email address is fdgf@ciee.org. So yes, please let us know if you have any questions. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for supporting this initiative to expand access to an international education. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye, everybody. Thank you, Cameron. I'm so glad you were here. Brilliant, as always. Thank you.
Hey, it comes from you.
It does not. Thank you again. Sandra, you still here? Oh, darn. Okay, I'll send her a note. Bye, everybody.